In part one of a 4-part series, we're going to talk about the to-do list for 4 SEC teams. We'll do that right after the stinger. Felix Sharp, Matt Bruning, and Chris Moxley with you tonight. We're going to be covering Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, and who am I forgetting?
Georgia.
One other team. Georgia tonight in the SEC as we talk about what these teams need to do to get ready for the spring. But before we do that, the NCAA, the day after being named or being disclosed that they were being investigated for potential NIL violations, they have filed a lawsuit against the NCAA, making antitrust claims. Chris, your thoughts on the NCAA and the this next chapter in really what I think is probably the demise of the NCAA.
Yeah, this lawsuit that Tennessee filed against them is in response to essentially NIL violations in regards to the recruitment of Nico Iamaleava, which obviously extremely well publicized. Everyone knew like all the details, which is weird for an NIL deal. But the crux of it is a booster part of the, I think, Spire Collective flew Nico out, and it was it violated the rules or whatever, right? Every program is doing this. It's nothing new, but Tennessee has a very specific incentive to refute this, which is they had to deal with all the Jeremy Pruitt stuff. So like they'll be a second-time offender of NCAA violations. So it's important to Tennessee to get this right. The crux of the issue, and it's been the crux of every single lawsuit filed against the NCAA, is you are basically antitrust in every capacity of what you're doing. You treat these student athletes like employees, yet they don't have the same rights as employees. And a lot of that is based on non-compete stuff, antitrust stuff. The crux of this specific lawsuit is an income-based, like you're not allowing them to earn income based on their ability to, market themselves and get the most money for the player itself. A lot of different lawsuits floating around for that kind of like tangentially relate to this, but I think this is one that could result in something. Virginia joined on as well, and I kind of expect other states to join on too.
Yeah, we got to get some information on where the case was filed, if it was filed in state court or in federal court. But, I mean, in federal court, the Supreme Court has been very player-friendly in its most recent opinions in NCAA cases. So I don't know why this would be any different. They're kind of the school representing the players really on home turf, whether it's state court or federal court. So I would be interested to see what happens here moving forward. Matt, any thoughts about the NCAA litigation in Tennessee?
No, I mean, I don't think it's something that's going to happen this year. So it'd be something to watch. I mean, we've talked a lot about that for the past couple of years, that we think at some point these power conferences were going to break away from the NCAA and become their own entity anyway. I know, Chris, we were texting about it beforehand. We both think that it would be smart if the NCAA at least was still there to maybe run the non-revenue sports, because obviously we don't want to see, like gymnastics, polo, whatever else is. I mean, basketball, football drive a lot of the revenue in college football, college sports. We don't want to see all these other sports go away and these athletes not have any way to play. But I think that football and probably basketball we could see in the next couple of years possibly separating away from the NCAA and being their own entities in a sense.
And my guess would be that would be an employee-based model where the student athletes are employees of the university, and then probably
I
like
do
some
not
sort
want
of
to see
collective.
that. I do not want to see that, because right now
It would be some sort of collective
make
bargaining
as
agreement,
much
though.
of what. That's why I don't want to see, because collective bargaining equals salary caps. And right now, college football is the most American sport because you can actually earn what it is that you are worth. If we get collectively bargained agreements in the you're going to have salary caps, and Nico Iamaleava's $8 million becomes, $2 million because I got to pay everything else. I want to see it just like it is. Just get rid of the NCAA, no regulations, just fairness and capitalism. That's what I want to see.
I mean, I don't know that we wanted to go down this rabbit.
You are a communist. You are all a communist.
But is it really that?
I
I know most of these players can't get whatever, the market wants to pay them, but we've seen there is in essence a cap on this already. We heard about when Quinshaw Junkins jumped in the portal, and it was running backs are only making about 700 to 900K. So they're putting, whether it's actual salary caps on or not, there are teams putting caps on it. I mean, Austin's not here to help me and him laud over you guys that we were right. We have not seen anybody come in and get a bigger contract than Nico since that happened. That is course corrected in a massive way.
Whatever.
They had. It's course corrected in a massive way. We are not seeing freshmen get paid like that anymore.
Offered like $12 million.
Who?
Or like 11.5.
I don't hear who you said.
With the
Sound like
with
you said.
Jaden Rashada.
No, it maybe Florida couldn't pay it if they did. I don't know if that's actually true or not. I mean, it didn't work out. We haven't seen freshmen get paid that way. It's actually switched more to the transfer portal. We've seen these coaches want to pour money into that, not the freshmen. And even then, you're talking about the high-end quarterbacks are only getting, they're saying like $1 million, maybe 1,200. Like that's it. They're not getting, or sorry, $1.2 million. Like they're not getting these massive deals anymore. So while I agree with you, there is no actual salary cap. Like schools are putting some kind of cap on what they're willing to pay people.
That's not okay. First of all, that's not a salary cap. Second of all, if you want to put a salary cap on what the players can earn, then put a salary cap on what a university can earn in its next TV deal. How about that? How about we do that? They can only negotiate to a certain ceiling. It doesn't make any sense. I want to move on here. Because we are starting a 4-part series tonight. This is the doldrums of kind of college football and football in general. But the good thing about college football is these teams are getting ready for the springs. There are winter workouts going on right now, and we'll turn around here in a second, and spring games will be being played in April. So we're going to start with the SEC. Obviously, we can't cover all 16 teams that are going to be in the SEC next year, but we'll cover 4 tonight, and we'll do this over 4 parts, getting through the SEC, and then we'll move on to the next conference. Let's start here with Georgia. They keep Kirby Smart. They keep Mike Bobo as offensive coordinator. This is a team that was generally balanced last year. Carson Beck, we think of Georgia as being a run-heavy team. Carson Beck actually led the NCAA in passing attempts, was like 417, I believe. He was top 25 in the country. So they are throwing the ball more than what you remember your traditional or historic Georgia teams to have thrown the ball in previous seasons. They lose Ladd McConkey to the NFL draft, Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, of course, Brock Bowers, and their running back, their top 2 running backs in Kendall Milton and Dejon Edwards are gone. So is Cedric Van Pran and Amarius Mims, the left tackle. Amarius Mims probably going to be a top of first-round NFL draft pick. In the transfer portal, they lose Brock Vandegrift to Kentucky, and then some other wide receivers, Mikey Muse, who was a kick returner, wide receiver, Denylon Morissette, Zach Haynes, CJ Smith, and Jackson Meeks. They lose all of those players. Some additions. I mean, Georgia has really been killing it here in the transfer portal. They get Trevor Etienne from Florida, Colby Young from Miami, Michael Jackson from USC, London Humphreys from Vanderbilt, Ben Urasek from Stanford. Man, I don't know that there is a program in the country, maybe other than like Colorado, if I had to think about it, that has added more skill position talent, and that's what we care about being a college fantasy football based channel, than Georgia. Georgia has really added it. Key questions heading into the spring. Matthew, let's start here. Is it Trevor Etienne in the field as far as this running back room goes, or do you expect for, Roderick Robinson to be heavily involved and maybe Andrew Paul, with the injury to Branson Robinson?
Yeah, I mean, I think Trevor Etienne's going to be the guy who leads the backfield. Now, how much of that is really the question we're going to have to look at. I mean, I think me and Chris talked about this recently. We said maybe it's like a 60-40 split, maybe. I think, I mean, you mentioned Roderick Robinson, who looked good before injuries last year. Andrew Paul, who we have yet to really see do anything, unfortunately, also due to injury. You also got Branson Robinson, who was getting more snaps than both of those guys. Also had, I believe it was a patellar injury,
Injury,
which is
ruptured patellar.
Yeah,
injury.
not pretty and not easy to come back from. So I do think because of that, you've got all three of those guys. Andrew Paul's 2 years removed from that injury, so I would hope. I mean, we obviously anybody listening to this, most people listening to this know that college teams don't really have to report much about injuries, so we don't know that he's fully healthy. The hope would be that he is. I think Etienne will lead the backfield. I mean, you mentioned earlier they were more passive. I think you meant to say, by the way, Beck led the SEC. You said led college, but then was top 25. Led SEC in passing.
He led the SEC in passing. He was top 25 in the country in passing attempts. Yeah, sorry.
And even with that, though, I mean, and this shows how many plays I think they ran, they were almost a 50-50 split on the run. So as much as Carson Beck was passing the ball, they were still running the ball a ton. So I think Trevor Etienne has a chance to be a really good running back for them. I still think they'll mix those other guys in. But like I said, I agree with what Chris said a couple weeks ago. I think it's going to be more of like that 60-40 split. Now, that 40 may be split between all three of those backup guys, and Etienne still getting the bulk of it, though, at that 60.
So Andrew Paul played quite a bit last year. I think he was fourth on the team amongst running backs in carries. I would expect him to actually play quite a bit this year because I gotta assume Branson Robinson is not going to be in the conversation. So it's Trevor Etienne, Roderick Robinson, and Andrew Paul. Let me say this about Roderick Robinson. We got to see him late in the season. Listen, I know that he was 220 pounds, and in high school, I think we had him at over 21.5 miles per hour, maybe even 22. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong.
He was over 22.
But he did not look like he had a lot of juice on the field for Georgia. I mean, I'm talking about like an Elijah Holyfield situation. I'm a little bit scared of Roderick Robinson, his lack of burst and explosiveness from what I saw, but I don't know if anybody shares that concern.
No, I mean, he came in from the spring being injured. He was injured all season long. That's where it's really hard to guess like what he's going to do. Like I said, I don't know how quickly Branson's going to be able to come back from his. So maybe you are right. I'm looking at Andrew Paul's stats. Yeah, man, 129 yards rushing last year. I honestly did not realize he had even touched the ball. So, I mean, yeah, he probably is the number 2, which is a good thing for him to finally get that shot. But I still think, like you said, Etienne is going to be the leader of the backfield.
Yeah, I have no idea what the rotation behind Etienne will look like, to be honest. I feel like that every year with Georgia backs. Like, what is the rotation? Because they have so many talented running backs in that backfield. It's just hard. But I do think Etienne himself, his stock has improved dramatically. I think he was I don't want to say unathletic, out of shape running back, but he was a big boy, and he's really rounded himself into a good running back. And I think he'll be a really solid player for Georgia this year.
And he was good with Florida last year, splitting carries with Montrell Johnson. I mean, so even if he's in a split backfield, he can still be productive. I don't know that any of these guys are a value. Andrew Paul was probably taken. He's probably rostered in most of your leagues because of how he hyped him up 2 years ago. Branson Robinson and Roderick Robinson are definitely rostered. So I don't know that there's any value here to mine as far as the running back room goes. We transfer over to the tight end room. You lose Brock Bowers. Chris, I mean, I got to toss this up to you. You're our tight end guy. You got Pierce Spurlin, Oscar Delp, and Lawson Lucky there. Pierce Spurlin might not be rostered in some leagues, but Oscar Delp and Lawson Lucky probably definitely are. What are your feelings about Oscar Delp going into his third year?
I've seen him talked about in Devy circles, and I think that's certainly a mistake. He was not very good last year in the times that we saw him, and I actually think he's pretty overrated by the Devy crowd. I like Austin Lucky. They loved him in spring practice last year. I think that he could have had a bigger impact last year, but if anyone in this room is worth targeting, I think it's Lucky. I think Delp is certainly a fade at his current price.
I think I'm going to steal this, and I think it's from Corey from back to Devi, but he remarked how Oscar Delp just doesn't break any tackles. It's not physical at the catch point and not physical after the catch. So that's something to pay attention to here after the spring.
Is he only hyped up because he's the replacement for Brock Bowers?
For Brock Bowers. I think he had a decent athletic profile too. I don't have it in front of me, but I think
he did.
Yeah. So I think that if you look at the wide receiver core, Ra Thomas is returning, Dominic Lovett is returning, Arian Smith is returning. Dominic Lovett actually was second on the team as far as wide receivers go in receptions. But when I look at the potential makeup of this team with those three guys, we could potentially be seeing more 2 tight end sets with this Georgia team. I don't know. Arian Smith, I thought that he was going to be more of a factor than he was last year, especially because Carson Beck loves to throw the ball that deep rainbow downfield. But we didn't see a lot of Arian Smith, and he was generally healthy. I don't know when Arian Smith is going to come on and just explode on the scene. It's one of the fastest players in college football. And of course, London Humphreys is there to, he's probably competing with Ra Thomas for an outside position. Dominic Lovett in the slot. Arian Smith can be used everywhere. I don't know. Matt, do you have any thoughts about London Humphreys? At one point, he was the number 1 wide receiver in the transfer pool.
Yeah, I mean, if he's used as that deep field threat, I think that he's going to be fine. We saw, and you talked about how much they threw the ball last year with Carson Beck. I don't know how often people talk to how effective he was and how efficient he was as well. And I don't know that even takes a step back. So I could see him being the one. I think that room is wide open. I mean, I know Mike loves Colby Young coming over from Georgia. It has been a long time since they've had a 1,000-yard wide receiver. I don't think that they're going to have it this year. I actually think the biggest probably winner in all of this, the transfer portal in and out for Georgia is going to be Benjamin Eurosek. I mean, that dude was a stud tight end at Stanford with no passing game, and now he gets a quarterback like Carson Beck in an offense that's not afraid to use the tight end. I agree with you. I think they're going to be running 2 tight end sets, and that's why I think this whole group, Pierce Spurlin, Lawson Lucky, Oscar Delp, all these guys that we've had hope for over the past couple of years are going to be nothing because of Eurosek. I think he's going to be the one who not necessarily steps in and takes over as Brock Bowers, but probably is closer to producing that than anybody else.
And I totally screwed that up, not mentioning the transfers into the wide receiver room, into the tight end room. Ben Eurosek, Colby Young, London Humphreys, all of those guys are going to play a factor, even though they have some talented returning players in those 2 rooms. I think a question for this team is who takes the backup quarterback position. Obviously with Brock Vandergriff. I don't even know if Brock Vandergriff was the backup last year. Gunnar Stockton, I think, has to be that guy. But, I mean, Chris, Matt, is Gunnar Stockton a guy that you are rostering in anticipation of 2025 or no?
I think he stinks, so no. I'll be honest with you. I've seen him play a couple times, and I am severely unimpressed. So no. But I mean, are we sure that isn't Jackson Muschamp either? I mean, he's the guy that I thought would have been the 3rd string. I don't know that he hasn't entered the portal either. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure I want to roster any Georgia backup.
Vandergriff, Stockton, and then Colin Drake was the only other quarterback to throw a pass last year. He just threw 1. I think he's going to be a junior this year. So it's just something to watch for. Carson Beck, by the way, my number 1 quarterback going into 2024.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Gunnar Stockton's as horrible as Chris says that he is. He definitely needed to make some improvements. A dude who I could be wrong. I want to say is set the record for most passing yards in the state of Georgia over players like Trevor Lawrence and is it Justin Fields? I don't remember who the other was. High named players. He set the record over. I mean,
but that's not the question, Matt. You get 15 rounds in a freshman supplemental draft. Are you trading one of those draft picks for Gunnar Stockton in anticipation of him taking the starting job in 2025?
I think it comes down to him and Ryan Puglisi, unless they're going to go into the transfer portal, which I think that's hard to just assume that they're going to do that every single
Which
year.
could potentially be that could be an option.
Yeah, I mean, it
for a
could
team
be,
like
but we
Georgia.
don't know what. I mean, look at this year's transfer portal. There was not a really good. I mean, we're talking about Chris will tell you all the time about Ohio State fans jumping in his DMs because they got Walker Howard. He's like, he's not that good. Like, it was not that good of a transfer portal QB class. So I don't know that Georgia does that. There was once upon a time where people did not think, myself included, Carson Beck was any good, and he's going out there and proved people wrong. Like, I don't know that we can
He
judge
proved y'all wrong. He proved y'all wrong.
I don't know that we can
don't
judge
include me in
Gunnar
this one.
Stockton on his limited play right now. I do think that it will come down to him, and Puglisi is probably the backup. I think Puglisi's got a lot to work on too. I mean, he's a very, very talented freshman, very strong arm. What was it? He even talked about his love for baseball. His first throw was like a 93-mile-per-hour fastball. Like, he's a interesting quarterback prospect, but I think he's got to learn too. I mean, you got to give Gunnar Stockton some love. Dude's been in, he'll be in the system for at that point, 2 years, going into his third year in that system, possibly with the chance to take it over. I think he would be the favorite to take over Georgia once Beck goes.
Yeah. Speaking of freshmen, they have the number one freshman class, but it's very heavy on defense and offensive line. 10 of the top 10 recruits in Georgia's class are defensive players. I think there's one tight end in the top 10 of their class. We are looking at potential post-spring transfers, and it's fun. Whoever loses the tight end job, whoever's the fourth guy there, that could be, Pierce Sperlin, maybe Lawson Lucky, maybe Oscar Delp. I think one of those guys could be if Benjamin Urasek looks to be, the primary guy, and they're only using one tight end. But other than that, I mean, especially the wide receivers, Ra Thomas already transferred, Dominic Lovett already transferred, London Humphreys, he just transferred in. Arian Smith has not used his transfer, so maybe, if he's low on the depth chart, he could go be a speed threat for someone else for potential post-spring transfers. That's Georgia. Let us know what you think in the comments. And while you're at it, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel. Support what it is that we're doing at campus2canton.com. If you haven't checked out the website, I recommend that you do that also. Let's move here to Arkansas. Arkansas offensive coordinator Dan Enos is out. I think Dan Enos was at one point the head coach at Central Michigan, if I remember correctly. 117th in offensive EPA per play this year. Dan Enos out. Bobby Trino from Texas A&M is in. Sam Pittman, could this be his last year? If his record drops below 5,500, his buyout drops comparatively, or there's a word there I'm missing. 50% of his remaining salary, if his record since 2001 is below 500, it's currently at 20-18. So Sam Pittman playing for his salary this year and to remain the head coach. They lose Bo Lemer, a top 5 center in this draft class, and Brady Latham, a left guard. Transferring out KJ Jefferson. For some reason, our video on KJ Jefferson was like one of the most popular that we've ever done on this channel. Of course, they lose Raheem Sanders to USC. And AJ Green, who I was a big fan of. I think AJ Green, he's one of these guys that's got a 10-400-meter dash under his belt coming out of the Oklahoma area. He's going back to Oklahoma State. I really like him. He's out. They bring in Taylon Green, talented dual threat quarterback from Boise State. They bring in Jaquindon Jackson, a one-time quarterback at Texas, running back at Utah, now running back at Arkansas. Tight end from Eastern Michigan, Andres Paskey. How do you say that, Chris Moxley? You know how to say it.
You nailed it. It's Andre Paskey.
I did it? Okay.
Yeah.
From Ypsilanti stand up, Fernando Carmona, a left tackle from San Jose State. And they bring in some other offensive linemen here. I mean, I think the question for this team going into the spring is really, is it Taylon Green's job to lose, or potentially, could we see Jacoby Criswell or maybe even, Malachi Singleton, who I like for this number one spot, or is it Taylon Green's, Chris?
No, I mean, I think there should be a legitimate competition between Taylon Green and Jacoby Criswell. You brought in Criswell to essentially be the successor to KJ Jefferson. You brought in Green because he was available. There should be a competition. I think Green might ultimately win it, but both are good quarterbacks.
Matt, we were rostering Taylor Green last year because of his dual threat ability, but he's making the jump to the Power 5 level. I feel like, you probably have to fade him because we like that talent at Boise State. It's not the same at Arkansas, especially when you can't throw.
Yeah, I mean, not only is he making the jump to the Power 5, he's not making the jump to like the Big 12. He's making the jump to the SEC. Arkansas, fairly tough schedule this year as well. And don't forget, Jacoby Criswell at one point in time was a better quarterback than Drake.
Quarterback than Drake May. They had to flip a coin. They had to flip a coin to figure out who was going to start. Yeah.
Let's not forget how good Jacoby Criswell is. Yeah, I would actually think that I think Jacoby Criswell is going to be the starter come week 1. I just think he's going to be on a very short leash. I think that's why they brought Taylor Green in to challenge him. I think it says more about Malachi Singleton that they weren't willing to let him be the second guy. They went into the transfer portal to get a talent. It doesn't mean the Singleton's not going to be good, but maybe they feel he needs another year. I do think he was a little bit raw as a quarterback coming out of high school. So I think Jacoby Criswell ends up starting out at Arkansas. Now, I don't think he's quite at least not that I can remember, quite the athlete that KJ Jefferson or Talon Green are. So I think it might be a little bit of a change in the offense, which is why I think short leash, we probably see Green at some point, but I think Criswell starts week
1. Who's going to protect them? They had bad offensive line play last year, and 43% of the snaps from the offensive line return in 2024. Luke Haas figures to be a key focal point in this offense once he's healthy. He did break his clavicle on September 30th. But Luke Haas, Chris, a consensus top 5 tight end. He should be, correct?
Yeah, he's a tremendous player. You saw him come on, and I think he was ranked behind his counterpart, Shamar Easter, who also went to Arkansas, who's he's more of a wide receiver. He is 6'5", 225. But Luke Haas was awesome last year. Stepped in immediately and was a huge contributor for Arkansas. And they bring back a lot of their production too. And I expect Haas to be part of that. A clavicle injury late September, you should be ready for spring. I don't think that's going to limit him at all. But it's important to note, because they have pretty good tight end depth behind him.
They do return their top 3 pass catchers, including Haas, including Andrew Armstrong and Isaac Tesla, the transfer from Hillsdale College. Chris Moxley, you would have loved Hillsdale College there in Michigan. You'd fit right in there. At the running back position, I think we all kind of believed in Rashad Dubinion last year. And now he has the competition of Isaiah Augustave, who's going to be a sophomore in 2024, a taller, lankier running back who, Arkansas kind of gets the same profile or similar profiles at the running back position. And I think that's no different with Augustave, Jaquindon Jackson, and Rashad Dubinion. If Isaiah Augustave is for some reason not drafted or is a free agent in your league, I would at least put him on a watch list and maybe even consider picking him up with, a 15th round pick in your upcoming supplemental draft. Matt, any take on, this running back room and who you prefer?
I'd say probably Dubinion, at least to start off with. I think we were big fans of Augustave. I think he could end up taking over. Jaquindon Jackson, I just don't think's it. I know he had a couple good games a year and a half ago as Utah's running back. Did transfer, as you mentioned, from Texas, was a quarterback there. Actually tried to be a quarterback at Utah. That didn't work out. Switched to running back. I just think his vision's questionable. He's not that good of a receiver either. I don't know that he ends up doing much, especially with, again, the jump to, you just mentioned how bad the offensive line is. I understand they're returning a lot of that production, but again, Arkansas has a tough schedule this year in the SEC. I don't think they're getting any help quarterback.
Yeah.
It's going to be, I think, tough for Jaquindon Jackson to get going. So I think it's going to be a fairly even split between the 3 of them. I think Dubinion probably is the leader of the backfield. I don't know that I want to roster. I shouldn't say that. You're not starting any of these guys. I would agree with you, and I'm probably using a last round pick or putting Augustave on the watch list because he is athletically gifted running back that I think could end up taking over and be really good for Arkansas, but I don't know that happens this year.
And he's taller too. I don't know if he's 6'2", but he's like 6'1", 6 something, if I remember correctly. A little bit lanky and needs to fill out to have a better BMI. So watch out for that running back room. As far as potential post-spring transfers, I think you got to throw Malachi Singleton, who I actually like at the quarterback position. He could leave if he's clearly behind Taylor Green and Jacoby Criswell. And then, Chris, as you mentioned, Shamar Easter could make the jump to get more opportunity. But, it just depends on where he's at on the depth chart.
Just really quick on Augustave, just to give the listeners an idea, because you mentioned how he needs to fill out a little bit more. Listed at 6'1", 208 in our athletic comp database. He's comped to guys like Kenyon Drake, Melvin Gordon, and who is the other one? Darren McFadden. So, it's some pretty interesting comps in that list. But, again, we need to see it. He was also a little bit raw coming into college.
I actually kind of like what Arkansas did in the portal, for what it's worth.
Yeah.
I actually think Fernando Carmona from San Jose State's a pretty good player, and Addison Nichols I think could be pretty good. I'm not totally downgrading the Arkansas offense, for what it's worth. I think they could do decently well.
How much is that is related to Bobby Petrino being there?
I mean, I think Carmona was kind of a coup for Arkansas. He was a very well sought after tackle, and I'm surprised they got him, to be totally honest. I thought that he did really well at San Jose State. I like what Petrino can do, but you also have to consider it's a really weird situation. Oh, him going back,
former
to
head
Arkansas
coach coming back to be the
weird.
offensive coordinator. Yeah. I mean, he should, his first press conference, come out in a neck brace. I mean, that would be, if he had a sense of humor.
I can't believe he was hired back. To be honest, I just what is Arkansas doing? You can, even if you believe Petrino is the best guy for the job, what does your second look like on the list look like?
The speculation and the rumors about how he got that neck brace injury and everything, absolutely wild. Absolutely. I'm sure it's on Reddit somewhere if you want to go find it, if you're not aware. All right, let's move on here to Vanderbilt. Jerry Kill added as a chief consultant there after retiring from New Mexico. Offensive coordinator Joey Lynch out. Tim Beck in. This isn't my Tim Beck. No,
different Tim Beck. Tim Beck is
Not
the coach at Coastal Carolina. This is a different Tim Beck.
Okay. Division II national champ at Pitt State. 2 seasons at New Mexico State as offensive coordinator. 32nd in EPA per play in 2023. Not bad at all. I think that's why it makes sense that where are my notes here? Didn't they add Diego Pavia?
Yes, they did.
They did.
Okay,
and they added Blaze Berlowitz, who was Pavia's backup.
And Nate Johnson as well.
Nate Johnson, Diego Pavia at the quarterback position, and Blaze, how do you say his last name?
I've been saying Berlowitz, but
Berlowitz. So you got 2 New Mexico State transfers there. They also, if you remember, Loic Fungi at Texas Tech, a longer, lankier wide receiver. He's in Vanderbilt now. Jeremiah Dillon from Ole Miss, and right guard Stephen Lasoya from Mississippi State. Those are the transfers in. Now, this was a team. I mean, I don't know if there was a team that was more gutted in the transfer portal than Vanderbilt. They lose London Humphreys. They lose Will Shepard. They lose Jaden McGowan. They lose A.J. Swan, who's not even going to start at LSU. They lose Ken Seals, and they lose Patrick Smith. They lost a lot to the transfer portal. They also lose to the draft Justin Ball, Logan Kyle, right tackle or interior lineman, Bradley Ashmore, and who was a 4-year starter on the right side. And they lose Julian Hernandez, a 3-year starter at center. I mean, this team was gutted at wide receiver. They only returned 27% of production. Offensive line has a lot of holes. I mean, I don't know. Matthew, I dare you to pick somebody who's going to be fantasy relevant in 2024 or that has Devi value here on this Vanderbilt team. I dare you.
All right. So I won't go Devi value, but someone who will be CFF relevant, I think, Nate Johnson. Incredible athlete. Now, look, there's a realistic shot that Diego Pavia ends up winning the job. He's a much better passer. But when I tell you that Nate Johnson is arguably one of the fastest players in college football, I legitimately mean that. He was an Elite 11 finalist. He has a very good arm, quick release, smooth throw of the ball. But again, extremely fast. We're talking about, I pulled it up, I wanted to see in here. He's got the comms to Vic, Pat White, Seneca Wallace. I mean, it's some interesting quarterback prospects in here. All 90 plus on his speed, burst, and agility scores, 6'1", 191. If they use him in a way like as a rushing quarterback, as Moxley just continues to give me like the people's eyebrow over here, I think that he could be a very intriguing player for them, because I think there's going to be a lot of times where they're using him in those run pass options and he ends up just running the ball, or when the pocket just absolutely collapses on him because they don't have an offensive line, he takes off and gets a lot of rushing. He's not that good of a passer, and that's why I think Diego Pavia could end up starting over him. But if Nate Johnson is your starting quarterback for the Vanderbilt Commodores, I think there's going to be some pretty decent times where you're going to actually want to start him in your lineups. So
Nate Johnson.
It's going to be Diego Pavia. I mean, they brought Tim back over. We talked about him like he was the offensive coordinator that coached Pavia. No surprise there. They also brought over Blaze Berlowitz, who was Pavia's backup. I mean, I'd be shocked if Pavia wasn't the guy. And they also added Jerry Kill, who, he had to retire medically from the New Mexico State job. And he did the same with I believe the Minnesota job is where he did it, but he's done it multiple times. Like it's a legit health issue, but it also means that like he's going to be around to help these players out and help, coach his team. And I think that's a great addition, but yeah, I just think it's going to be Pavia, and like he's going to, I'm very curious what he's going to do in the SEC, because I think he's pretty good. Not sure he's SEC good.
Diego Pavia was a top 15 quarterback in CFF last year, something like that.
Yeah,
I think
he was really. He got hurt at the end of the season, but he was really good.
In points per game, I'm pretty sure he was up there. He might even be like top 10 or something like that. That leaves us with Kentucky. And off the top of my head, I think Mississippi State is a team that I'm really interested to see with Jeff Lebby now the head coach. But other than that, like my interest, I really want to see what Kentucky looks like, because they get an ad here in at quarterback in Brock Vandegrift transferring from Georgia, and then the running back position with Chip Trainium. You got Sumo from NC State there, and there's just some intrigue specifically regarding those two. Let's back up a little bit. Mark Stoops returns after flirting with Texas A&M. I don't know what happened there, if the boosters just were not happy with that potential hire, but Mark Stoops is back. Offensive line coach Zach Yinzer out. Eric Wolford in. Wolford was at Alabama for 2 years and Kentucky prior, so he's coming back. He was a Joe Moore Award finalist in 2021. Wide receiver coach Scott Woodward is out. DeKale Shorts is in. DeKale Shorts was at Houston 3 years prior. So you're talking about Nathaniel Dell, Sam Brown, Matthew Golden coached those guys. And they have a wide receiver core at Kentucky that we're actually intrigued with Dane Key and Barry and Brown. Key departures, Matt, like lose your boy, Ray Davis, who's been around college football for entirely too long. Devin Leary, I thought that he could, potentially get the most out of this offense coming over from NC State. I don't know that was necessarily the case until the bowl game. Played excellent in the bowl game, but he's out, and Tavion Robinson is out. And then the transfers in. I mentioned Brock Vandegrift from Kentucky. Bo Allen, who started at Kentucky, then Georgia Southern, and is now back at Kentucky. He'll be a walk-on. Chip Trainium, Raymond Cottrell, wide receiver from Texas A&M. Jamari Macklin from North Texas. Left guard Jalen Farmer and right tackle Gerald Mincy from Tennessee are added. I want to stop and ask a question here. Chris, Matt and I really hyped up Chip Trainium when the transfer news was announced that he was going there because of his athleticism, because of what we saw at Arizona State before he switched to linebacker at Ohio State. Now he's back at running back. What's your take on Chip Trainium's value headed into 2024?
Yeah, I mean, I've always questioned his high-end athleticism for his size. Like, right, he's 230 plus. I don't know that he's an exceptional athlete that will like break the mold, but it's clear to me that he is a good athlete and a good running back. Like, I've seen him play running back to this point well enough to tell me that like this dude can play. Yeah, I think it's an interesting signing for Kentucky, and I think he's like probably not that bad. Like I wouldn't be surprised if he went day 2 next year.
That's what we said. That's what we said, and we're teased for it. That's what we said. Would you take Chip Trainium? Go ahead. Would you take Chip Trainium in the first or second round of a? Okay. Would you take Chip Trainium in the first 2 rounds of a supplemental draft? With a weak running back class specifically, weak freshman running back class.
No, it's a weak freshman class in general.
Yeah, I might take him at the end of the second. I think that's fair.
Did we not say this, Matthew?
Yeah, I mean, I think we both leaned toward the first round, which
the first round we did, but
take,
first round, second round. What a details. Okay. Let's see what else here to talk about with Kentucky. What are we going to see as far as Brock Vandagriff? We saw him in limited action. We've seen him in 2 spring games. The first spring, you got to remember, Brock Vandagriff, a 5-star quarterback coming into Georgia. He was a one-time Oklahoma commit before Caleb Williams went to be with Lincoln Riley. That first spring game, his freshman year, Brock Vandagriff came on the field after Jackson Muschamp. I mean, it was Carson Beck, somebody else, Jackson Muschamp, and then Brock Vandagriff, who you heard was not having a great spring practice, came on the field, really late. Even last year, he looked terrible in the spring. I mean, talk about throwing the balls into the dirt, et cetera, et cetera. Now, he's going to be the starter here at Kentucky. Matt, do you have any belief that Brock Vandagriff can kind of turn it around and we see some sort of spark that we didn't really see with Devin Leary at the helm?
I mean, I would find it hard to believe that he could. I mean, maybe it's 2 years of being able to work on his. I do not think he was that good of a passer, and I was with you. Like, I thought Devin Leary was going to open up this offense. That did not happen. I find it hard to believe that Brock Vandagriff is going to. I was going to say I really think if you roster Barry and Brown, you're just praying he returns a couple more kicks this year and just knocks it out at the combine or transfers out to get some value out of him. I think Chris is 100% right. Chip Trainium's going on the second round because that dude's about to run for like 1,500 to 1,800 yards because Brock Vandagriff's just going to keep turning around and handing the ball off to him all season long. Like I hope he proves me wrong. He's a 5-star. I understand that sometimes the services, we get things wrong. He was not playing at if I remember correctly, a very high-end school. I'm pretty sure it was what is this? Like something Christian.
Yeah, he was in Georgia, but it was not a particularly high level of competition there.
He has the tools. Like, he's got if I'm remembering, a decent 40. Like, he's athletic.
He's athletic.
Enough.
He can throw the ball. He's a little bit erratic. He is erratic as a thrower.
Which
he
might
work for him.
Pace Academy?
No, I think it was like a Prince something Christian school, if I'm remembering correctly.
It wasn't Buford.
No, he wasn't playing
not Buford, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, he was not playing the high-end competition. So I think he leaves a lot to be desired. Now, again, we haven't seen much of him, though. For all we know, the dude's actually been like killing it behind the scenes at Georgia. And then when they're like, nah, Carson Beck did what he did, like, we're going to stick with him. And Brock said, fine, I'm going to go somewhere else and do it. I mean, Kentucky clearly thought enough of him to bring him in. that's the only real quarterback they have on the roster, if I'm remembering correctly. So, like, I maybe he proves us all wrong. I'm not betting on it. If there's anybody here, thank you, Andrew. Yes, Prince Avenue Christian School in Georgia. I think it's going to be the Chip Trayanum show. Like, I really think, Barry and Brown.
It's always that way at Georgia. I mean, going back to Benny Snell, I mean, they turn around and they hand the ball off and rely on that offensive line. I mean, that offensive line has put in some real talent to the NFL. So they have kind of always relied on the running game, at least under Mark Stoops. That being said, they do have.
Go ahead, well, I was going to say, I mean, adding Wolford back is huge. Like, maybe he didn't work out at Alabama, but like that dude can coach offensive line, like no doubt in my mind. And I don't want to, I know it's a little off topic, but Da'Keil Shorts, the wide receiver coach they added, like might be the most impactful positional coach in the country.
There we go.
Nathaniel Dell, Matthew Golden, Sam Brown, like this dude can coach wide receiver. Like it's a great hire.
I mean, he's got some talent to work with. Let's see if Barry and Brown can kind of return, I don't know, some mix of his 2022 and 2023 form. His ADOT in 2022, where he was used in sort of, kind of a gadgety screen type of way, it was 9.7. In 2023, flipped right around. They just threw him the ball deep. It was 16.6. This is a player that you got to get the ball into his hands. So it should probably be like a mix between the two, where we get him on some jet sweeps, we get him on some jailbreak screens, we get him on some reverses, and not just run him deep every single play. Matthew, Barry and Brown, I think he's a consensus top 20 wide receiver. He probably shot up in the offseason last year and then his value dropped a little bit with not making the jump in 2023 that we expected. What's your outlook for Brown, a guy that we have? Obviously, we saw against Iowa, and did they play Iowa in the spring game? Who did they play in the bowl game? I forgot who they played, but he had one of the best games of one of the best performances of anybody in the bowl game. Scored 3 touchdowns in 3 different ways. I mean, this is a guy with a high ceiling. Do you still have high expectations for him?
I mean, I do. He came into college, if I'm remembering, as an athlete, not even listed as a wide receiver. What was a little bit raw, but I mean, we're talking about a special player. I mean, me and Chris talked about it on a show a couple weeks ago. I know Zachariah Branch won the special teamer of the year, but I think you could argue Barry and Brown was right there as the best kick punt returner in the nation. If he's able to continue to do that, NFL teams will value that. You talked about what he can do deep down the field. I know Brock Vandagriff has the arm to challenge deep down the field. Will they use him that way? I don't know. So maybe they do get him more involved around the line of scrimmage and he's able to produce a little bit. I think once he goes to the combine, though, and blows up, I don't see why he won't be at least a day 2 pick. I think he's that athletically gifted to at least be a day 2 pick. He's produced. It has not been what we had hoped for. I mean, I think at one point in time we had him as like a top 12 ranked. At least I know I did. I had him as a top 12 ranked wide receiver probably last year. He's dropped some for me. I was just looking at my rankings. He's wide receiver 17, so still have top 20. But I think that you have to be cautious of what he does in college this year. But I definitely think he has an NFL future and probably at worst goes day 2.
Clemson. He reminds me a lot of Ted Ginn. I mean, similar body type, can return kicks, can return punts, is probably not as well-rounded as a wide receiver as you would like. Not yet, but he could definitely turn into that. I mean, I got to figure out where I have him in my rankings. I'm not sure. Let us know what you think about Kentucky's chances in 2024. Are you a fan, especially if you're a Kentucky fan? Are you a fan of Brock Bowers? I'm here in Kentucky. People are really excited about Brock Bowers being their quarterback.
Brock Vandagriff.
All the Kentucky fans. Yes. Did I say Brock Bowers?
Yeah.
Brock Vandagriff. They are excited about Brock Vandagriff being their quarterback. A lot of people.
I'm so sorry.
Of course. He's a former 5-star. That's all people see. Former 5-star.
They look at the 24/7 rankings and they're like, okay. All right. Appreciate your likes and subscribing to the channel. We will be back next week. It might even be earlier than Wednesday with part 2 covering 2 or 4 more teams here in the SEC. So stay tuned for that. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Apologies to Kirk Herbstreit. We ran out of time. We'll get them rescheduled soon. For Chris Moxley and Matt Bruning, I'm Felix Sharp. Good night. Good luck.